The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m. just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. Maria Santos rolled out of her small bed in the tiny apartment she shared with her 17-year-old daughter, Sofia. The room was dark and cold, but Maria moved through her morning routine without turning on any lights. She had memorized every step of getting ready for work. Maria pulled on her worn blue uniform with the faded name tag that simply read, Santos. The uniform was too big for her small frame, but it made her feel invisible, and that was exactly what she wanted. She grabbed her lunch bag from the refrigerator and kissed Sofia on the forehead while her daughter slept peacefully in the next room. The drive to the naval base took exactly 22 minutes through empty streets. Maria had timed it perfectly so she would arrive just as the security gates opened at 5 a.m. She parked her old Honda Civic in the same spot every day, far from the main buildings where nobody would notice it or her. The security guard at the gate was named Tom, and he barely looked up when Maria showed her ID badge. She had been coming through these gates for 3 years, and Tom had never once asked her how she was doing, or even said good morning beyond the required greeting. Maria preferred it this way. Being invisible meant being safe. Maria wheeled her cleaning cart through the corridors of the naval base like a ghost. The cart squeaked slightly on the left wheel, but she had learned to navigate around the squeaky spots. Her supplies were organized exactly the same way every day. Cleaning solutions on the top shelf, rags and towels on the middle shelf, vacuum attachments and brushes on the bottom shelf. The armory was her primary responsibility, and she took pride in keeping it spotless. The weapons had to be kept in perfect condition, and that meant the entire facility had to be dust-free and properly maintained. Maria understood the importance of this work even if nobody else seemed to notice what she did. She started her routine the same way every morning. First, she would dust all the weapon racks from top to bottom. Then she would clean the glass display cases that held the specialized equipment. After that, she would mop the floors in a specific pattern that ensured every corner was reached. Finally, she would empty all the trash cans and replace the liners. The work was quiet and methodical. Maria found peace in the repetition of her tasks. Each weapon rack had exactly 43 rifles, and she counted them as she cleaned. Each display case had specific items that never changed position. The floor had exactly 216 tiles, and she knew which ones had small chips or stains that needed extra attention. Maria had learned to move silently through the armory. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound on the polished floors. She never dropped her cleaning supplies or made any noise that might draw attention. The few times other personnel entered the armory while she was working, they acted like she was not even there. This invisibility was something Maria had worked hard to achieve. When she first immigrated from El Salvador 15 years ago, she had been loud and confident. She had opinions and ideas and wanted to make a difference in her new country. But life had taught her that sometimes the safest thing to be was invisible. Her daughter Sofia did not understand why her mother was so quiet and careful all the time. Sofia was born in America and spoke perfect English and felt like she belonged here. She sometimes asked her mother why she never talked about their life before they came to America. Maria always changed the subject or found some household chore that needed immediate attention. The truth was that Maria carried secrets that could put both of them in danger if the wrong people ever found them. So she had learned to blend into the background. She spoke only when spoken to, and even then she kept her answers short and simple. She never volunteered information about herself or asked questions about other people. Working at the naval base had been the perfect job for Maria. The security clearance process had been thorough, but she had passed all the background checks. Her refugee status and immigration papers were all in order. More importantly, the job allowed her to work alone most of the time without having to interact with many people. The pay was decent enough to support herself and Sofia. They lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood where nobody asked questions about where they came from or why Maria worked such early hours. Sofia could attend a good high school and had plans to go to college. This was all Maria had wanted when she made the difficult decision to leave everything behind and start over. The naval personnel who used the armory were professional and focused. They came in to check out their equipment and left without making small talk. The regular Navy sailors were polite but distant. The special operations teams that sometimes used the facility were even more serious and businesslike. Maria had learned to recognize the different types of soldiers. by their uniforms and the way they carried themselves. The Navy SEALs were easy to identify because of their confident movements and the respect other personnel showed them. They handled their weapons with a precision that Maria found familiar, though she was careful never to let anyone see her watching them. Sometimes, Maria would catch herself studying the way the SEALs organized their gear or cleaned their weapons. Their methods were efficient and professional. They treated each piece of equipment like their life depended on it working perfectly. Maria understood this mentality even though she could never let anyone know why. The morning routine never varied, and Maria liked it that way. Predictability meant safety. No surprises meant no attention. No attention meant no questions. No questions meant her secrets stayed buried where they belonged. As Maria finished dusting the last weapon rack, she glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 6:45 a.m. and the first shift of personnel would be arriving soon. She needed to finish mopping the floors and be gone before anyone else arrived. This was the schedule she had perfected over 3 years of working in the Armory. Maria had no way of knowing that this particular Tuesday morning would be different from all the others. She had no way of knowing that her carefully constructed invisible life was about to be shattered by a simple moment of human interaction. She had no way of knowing that 15 years of hiding was about to come to an end because of the way she would instinctively hold a rifle. For now, Maria Santos was still just the Armory cleaner. Still invisible, still safe, still keeping her secrets buried deep where they belonged. But in just a few minutes, everything would change forever. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison burst through the Armory doors at 6:52 a.m. This was 38 minutes earlier than his usual arrival time, and Maria Santos felt her heart skip a beat. In 3 years of working at the naval base, her carefully planned schedule had never been interrupted. Like this. Jake was moving with the urgent energy that Maria had learned to recognize in the special operations teams. His jaw was set tight and his eyes had the focused intensity that meant something important was happening. Maria quickly turned back to her mop bucket and tried to make herself even more invisible than usual. The SEAL commander was not alone. Behind him came 2 other members of his team moving with the same purposeful speed. Maria could hear them talking, in low voices about something called Operation Sandcastle, but she kept her head down and continued, mopping the same section of floor she had already cleaned twice. Jake went directly to weapon rack number 7 where his personal equipment was stored. Each SEAL had their own designated space and Jake had been using the same spot for the 2 years Maria had been observing the teams. She knew without looking that he would reach for his M4A1 rifle first, because that was always his pattern. But something was different this morning. Instead of the smooth, confident motion Maria had watched dozens of times before, Jake paused with his hand on the rifle. His experienced fingers were telling him something was wrong with the weapon, even before his eyes could see the problem. Maria continued mopping, but she was watching Jake from the corner of her eye. She had learned to observe everything while appearing to pay attention to nothing. Jake lifted the rifle from its rack and immediately frowned. The weight distribution was wrong and he could feel it instantly. The rifle had been damaged somehow during the previous day's training exercise. The barrel had a slight bend that was almost invisible to the naked eye, but completely obvious to hands that had held the same weapon hundreds of times. Jake needed to inspect the rifle properly, but the Armory lighting was dim, and he needed both hands free. Without really thinking about what he was doing, Jake turned toward the only other person in the room. Maria was standing about 10 feet away with her mop in her hands, looking like she was concentrating on cleaning the floor. She appeared harmless and helpful, and Jake needed someone to hold his rifle for just a moment. "Ma'am, excuse me," Jake said in the polite but commanding voice he used when speaking to civilian personnel. "Could you hold this for just a second while I grab a flashlight?" Maria looked up from her mop with what she hoped was a confused and slightly nervous expression. This was exactly the kind of attention she had spent 3 years avoiding, but she could not refuse a direct request from a Navy SEAL without seeming strange or suspicious. "Of course, sir," Maria replied in the quiet voice she used when forced to speak to military personnel. She leaned her mop against the wall and walked over to where Jake was standing. He held out the M4A1 rifle, expecting her to take it awkwardly like most civilians would. The moment the rifle touched Maria's hands, Jake Morrison felt every muscle in his body tense. Something was very wrong with this picture, but his brain needed a few seconds to process exactly what he was seeing. Maria did not fumble with the unfamiliar weight of the weapon. She did not hold it away from her body like it was dangerous or scary. She did not ask nervous questions about whether it was loaded or safe to touch. Instead, her hands found the correct grip positions automatically. Her right hand wrapped around the pistol grip with her trigger finger extended along the trigger guard in perfect safety position. Her left hand found the handguard with exactly the right pressure and positioning. Her body shifted into a modified ready stance, without her appearing to think about it. Most shocking of all, Maria's eyes immediately and instinctively checked the selector switch to confirm the weapon's safety status. This was not something a civilian would know to do. This was not something that could be learned from movies or television shows. This was muscle memory that came from extensive professional training. Jake stood frozen for several long seconds, just staring at the way Maria held his rifle. His combat-trained mind was processing details and drawing conclusions that made his blood run cold. The cleaning lady who had been working in their armory for 3 years was handling military weapons with the skill of a trained operator. Maria realized she had made a terrible mistake the moment she saw Jake's expression change. She had been so focused on not appearing suspicious that she had forgotten to act like a normal civilian. Her body had responded to the familiar feel of a combat rifle with 15 years of ingrained muscle memory. She tried to recover by shifting her grip to something more awkward and civilian-like, but it was too late. Jake had already seen everything he needed to see. His eyes were now scanning Maria with the same intensity he used to evaluate potential threats in combat situations. "Where exactly did you learn to handle a rifle like that?" Jake asked in a voice that had gone completely professional and serious. This was no longer a casual request for help. This was an interrogation beginning. Maria felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around her. She tried to hand the rifle back to Jake while mumbling something about needing to finish her cleaning duties. But Jake did not take the weapon back. Instead, he stepped closer to her and his eyes never left her face. "Ma'am, I need you to answer my question," Jake said firmly. "Civilians don't handle military weapons the way you just handled mine. So I'm going to ask you again, where did you receive weapons training?" The other two SEALs had stopped their own equipment preparation and were now paying attention to what was happening between Jake and Maria. The armory had become very quiet except for the sound of Maria's heart beating, so loudly she was sure everyone could hear. Maria looked at the rifle in her hands and then at Jake's determined face. She looked at the other two SEALs who were now watching her with professional interest. She thought about her daughter Sophia sleeping peacefully at home and about the quiet, invisible life they had built. Together, 15 years of running and hiding had just come to an end because of one careless moment. Maria Santos, the invisible cleaning lady, was about to disappear forever. What would take her place was something much more dangerous and much more complicated. The truth was about to come out whether she wanted it to or not. Maria Santos stood in the middle of the armory holding Jake Morrison's rifle, while her entire world collapsed around her. The weapon felt familiar in her hands like an old friend she had not seen in years. But that familiarity was exactly what was going to destroy the safe life she had built for herself and her daughter. Jake was studying Maria with the same intense focus he used when identifying enemy combatants in hostile territory. His trained eyes were cataloging details he had somehow missed during the 3 years Maria had been cleaning the armory. Small things that individually meant nothing but together painted a very different picture of who she really was. The way Maria stood with her feet positioned for stability and quick movement. The way her eyes automatically scanned the exits and entrances of the room, even while trying to appear calm. The way she held her shoulders back with a confidence that seemed at odds with her quiet cleaning lady persona. Most telling of all was the way she continued to hold the rifle with perfect form despite her obvious nervousness. Her grip had not relaxed or become sloppy. Her finger remained properly positioned along the trigger guard. Her muzzle awareness was flawless as she kept the barrel pointed in a safe direction without appearing to think about it. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time," Jake said in the calm but authoritative voice he used during high-stress situations. "Where did you receive your weapons training? And please don't tell me you learned it from watching movies or going to a shooting range with friends." Maria felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she fought them back. Crying would make her appear weak and vulnerable. More importantly, crying might make Jake think she was just a frightened civilian instead of recognizing her for what she really was, a trained operator who had spent years in combat situations. The other two SEALs in the room had moved closer without appearing to do so. Maria noticed their positioning immediately. They were creating a triangle formation that would prevent her from reaching either exit. This was not conscious threatening behavior. This was professional instinct when dealing with an unknown potential threat. "You're special operations, aren't you?" Jake said quietly. It was not really a question. His voice had changed from interrogation mode to something approaching professional respect. "The way you hold that weapon, the way you carry yourself, the way you're tracking everyone's position in this room. You're not a civilian." Maria realized that continuing to deny the obvious would only make things worse. These men were trained to spot lies and evaluate threats. They had already seen enough to know she was not what she appeared to be. The only question now was whether she could trust them with the truth or if she would need to run again. "El Salvador," Maria said so quietly that Jake had to lean closer to hear her. 15 years ago, I was with the National Civil Police Special Operations Unit." Jake's expression changed immediately. He knew about the Salvadoran Special Operations Units. They had worked alongside American forces in counter-narcotics operations throughout Central America. These were not regular police officers. They were elite tactical teams trained to military standards and combat effectiveness. "What was your specialty?" Jake asked with genuine professional curiosity. Maria could hear the respect in his voice now. He was speaking to her as one operator to another instead of interrogating a suspicious civilian. "Sniper," Maria replied. The word felt strange coming out of her mouth after years of silence. "Counter-narcotics operations. Urban warfare. We worked with your DEA agents on joint operations against the cartels." The room became very quiet as the three SEALs processed this information. They were looking at Maria with new eyes now. She was not just the cleaning lady anymore. She was a combat veteran who had fought in some of the most dangerous operations in Central America. Jake carefully took his rifle back from Maria's hands. She released it reluctantly as if she was giving up a piece of herself. The weapon had felt right in her hands in a way that mops and cleaning supplies never would. For just a few moments she had remembered who she used to be before she became invisible. "Why are you here?" asked Petty Officer First Class Mike Chen, who was one of the other SEALs in the room. "Why are you cleaning our armory instead of using your skills somewhere more appropriate?" Maria looked at the three men who were waiting for her answer. She could see professional respect in their eyes now, but she could also see questions. They wanted to understand how a trained sniper had ended up mopping floors and dusting weapon racks. "I had to disappear," Maria said simply. "The cartels put a bounty on my head after my partner was killed. I could either keep fighting and put my daughter at risk, or I could run somewhere safe and start over." Jake nodded slowly. He understood the impossible choice Maria had been forced to make. Every special operations soldier knew that their dangerous work could follow them home and threaten the people they loved most. Sometimes the most courageous thing to do was walk away from the fight. "So you came here and became invisible," Jake said with understanding in his voice. "You got a job that would let you blend into the background and keep your head down. You never planned for anyone to find out who you really are?" "It worked for 3 years," Maria said with a sad smile. "Until you handed me that rifle and I forgot to pretend I didn't know how to use it." Mike Chen was shaking his head with amazement. "You've been cleaning our weapons for 3 years. You probably know more about the condition of our equipment than we do. And the whole time you were qualified to be training us instead of working for us." Maria felt a flutter of something she had not experienced in years. Pride. For just a moment she remembered what it felt like to be respected for her skills instead of invisible because of her fears. But that feeling was immediately followed by terror. If these men knew her secret, then other people might find out too. "Please," Maria said urgently, "you cannot tell anyone about this. If the wrong people find out where I am, my daughter and I will have to run again. I just want to keep cleaning and stay invisible." But Jake Morrison was already shaking his head. He was looking at Maria with the expression of someone who had just discovered a valuable resource that was being completely wasted. "Maria," Jake said, using her name for the first time, "I don't think staying invisible is going to be an option anymore." Maria Santos walked slowly back to her cleaning cart with trembling hands. The 3 Navy SEALs watched her every movement with professional interest. She felt exposed and vulnerable in a way she had not experienced since fleeing El Salvador 15 years ago. Her carefully constructed invisible life was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Jake Morrison was studying Maria with new understanding. The woman he had seen cleaning their armory for 3 years was not the same person standing before him now. Her posture had changed subtly. Her movements were more confident. Even the way she breathed seemed different now that her secret was exposed. "Tell us about your unit," Jake said gently. He had moved closer to Maria but kept his distance respectful rather than threatening. "What kind of operations did you run with the Salvadoran Special Operations?" Maria gripped the handle of her mop tighter, as if it could anchor her to her safe cleaning lady identity. But she knew there was no going back now. These men had seen through her disguise, and they deserved to know the truth about who had been working in their secure facility. "My unit was called Grupo de Operaciones Especiales," Maria said slowly. "We specialized in high-risk operations against the drug cartels. Urban combat, hostage rescue, counter-sniper operations. We worked closely with American DEA agents and sometimes with your military advisors." Petty Officer Mike Chen whistled softly. "That's serious combat experience. The cartels in El Salvador were as dangerous as any enemy we've faced in the Middle East. Maybe more dangerous because they had no rules and no limits." Maria nodded grimly. The cartels controlled entire neighborhoods in San Salvador. They had better weapons than the regular police, and they were completely ruthless. My unit was created to go places the regular forces could not go and do things they could not do. The third SEAL in the room was Chief Petty Officer David Rodriguez. He had been silent until now, but Maria could see recognition in his eyes. "I worked with some Salvadoran special operations teams during a joint training exercise in 2008, he said. "Those guys were incredibly skilled, professional, disciplined. How long did you serve?" 8 years, Maria replied. "I joined when I was 22 years old, right out of the police academy. They selected me for special operations training because of my marksmanship scores and psychological evaluations. I thought I would serve my full career and retire with honors." Jake could hear the pain in Maria's voice when she talked about her interrupted career. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "What made you leave?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. She had never told anyone the complete story of why she fled El Salvador. Not even her daughter Sophia knew all the details. But standing in this armory surrounded by weapons and talking to fellow warriors made her feel like she could finally speak the truth. "My partner was Sergeant Carlos Mendez," Maria began. "We had worked together for 4 years. He was like a brother to me. We specialized in long-range reconnaissance and precision shooting. The cartels hated us because we could reach them anywhere they tried to hide." Maria paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "We were tracking a high-value target named Eduardo Vasquez. He was a cartel lieutenant who coordinated drug shipments through the port of Acajutla. We had been watching his compound for 3 weeks, waiting for the right opportunity to take him." The 3 SEALs listened intently. They understood the patience and planning required for this kind of operation. They had conducted similar missions in Iraq and Afghanistan against high-value terrorist targets. "The operation went wrong from the beginning," Maria continued. "Our intelligence was bad. The compound was better defended than we expected. Carlos and I were separated during the initial assault. I heard him calling for backup on the radio, but I was pinned down by sniper fire from 2 different positions." Maria's voice became quieter as she relived the traumatic memory. "I could hear Carlos fighting for his life, but I could not reach him. By the time our backup unit arrived, it was too late. They found Carlos tortured and executed. The cartels had taken their time with him." Jake felt a familiar anger building in his chest. He had lost teammates in combat, and he understood the guilt and rage that came with being unable to save someone you cared about. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Losing a partner is the worst thing that can happen to an operator." 3 days later, the cartels posted pictures of Carlos on social media, Maria said with barely controlled emotion. They included a message saying that anyone who worked with him would receive the same treatment. "They specifically mentioned me by name and offered a $50,000 bounty for information about my location." Mike Chen shook his head angrily. "Those bastards never respected the rules of war. They targeted families and civilians to terrorize their enemies. I had a choice," Maria continued. "I could keep fighting and risk my daughter's safety, or I could disappear and let Sophia have a chance at a normal life. She was only 2 years old then. She deserved better than having a mother who lived with a target on her back." David Rodriguez understood the impossible decision Maria had faced. "So you used refugee assistance programs to immigrate to the United States. You created a new identity and found work that would let you blend into the background. I thought if I stayed quiet and invisible long enough, people would forget about me, Maria said. I thought the cartels would move on to other targets and I could keep Sofia safe. For 15 years it worked. Until this morning when I forgot to pretend I did not know how to handle a combat rifle. Jake was looking at Maria with a mixture of respect and concern. Maria, the cartels from 15 years ago are mostly gone now. The Drug Enforcement Administration and Salvadoran forces have dismantled most of those organizations. You might not be in as much danger as you think, but Maria shook her head firmly. The cartels have long memories and longer reach. There are people in El Salvador who still remember what my unit did to their operations. There are people who would still pay money to find me if they knew where to look. The Armory became quiet as the 4 veterans considered Maria's situation. She had sacrificed her career and her identity to protect her daughter. She had spent 15 years living in fear and hiding her true capabilities. Now her secret was exposed and she did not know what would happen next. What do we do now? Maria asked quietly. Are you going to report this to your commanders? Will I lose my job? Will I have to take Sofia and run again? Jake Morrison looked at his 2 teammates and then back at Maria Santos. We need to talk to our commanding officer, he said carefully. But Maria, I don't think you understand something important. You're not in trouble. You might actually be exactly what we've been looking for. Commander Sarah Mitchell sat behind her desk, reviewing mission reports when her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison. The message was brief but cryptic. Need to see you immediately about the Armory cleaning staff. This is priority 1. Sarah had been leading SEAL teams for 12 years, and she knew Jake well enough to understand that he did not use the words priority 1 lightly. She immediately cleared her schedule and told her assistant to send Jake to her office as soon as he arrived. 20 minutes later, Jake knocked on Commander Mitchell's door. He entered with the serious expression he usually reserved for pre-mission briefings. Behind him came Maria Santos, looking nervous and uncomfortable in her cleaning uniform. Commander, I need to discuss a security matter with you, Jake said formally. It concerns Maria Santos, who has been working in our armory for the past 3 years. Sarah looked at Maria with curiosity. She had seen the quiet cleaning woman around the base but had never had reason to interact with her directly. Maria seemed like exactly the type of invisible support staff that kept military facilities running smoothly. What kind of security matter? Sarah asked with concern. Her first thought was that Maria might have been stealing equipment or selling information. Security breaches were always a serious concern in special operations facilities. Maria is not who we thought she was, Jake said carefully. This morning I discovered that she has extensive military training and combat experience. She is a former member of the Salvadoran Special Operations Forces. Sarah's eyebrows rose sharply. This was not what she had expected to hear. She looked at Maria with new interest, studying her posture and demeanor for signs of deception or threat. Is this true? Sarah asked Maria directly. Do you have military background that was not disclosed during your security clearance process? Maria nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. I served 8 years with the Grupo de Operaciones Especiales in El Salvador. I was a sniper specializing in counter-narcotics operations. Sarah leaned back in her chair and processed this information. The Salvadoran Special Operations units were well known within military intelligence circles. They had been trained by American advisors and had conducted joint operations with DEA and military forces throughout the region. Why didn't you mention this background when you applied for your position here? Sarah asked. Military experience would have been considered an asset, not a liability. Maria shifted uncomfortably and glanced at Jake before answering. I was advised by the Refugee Assistance Program to keep my military background quiet. They said it might complicate my immigration status or make it harder to find civilian employment. Sarah nodded, understanding. Immigration law could be complex, and refugees were often given overly cautious advice about what information to volunteer. Tell me about your service record. What kind of operations did you participate in? For the next 30 minutes, Maria explained her military career to Commander Mitchell. She described her training at the International Law Enforcement Academy, her specialized sniper course with American instructors, her 4-year partnership with Sergeant Carlos Mendez, the dozens of successful operations against cartel targets. Sarah listened carefully, asking detailed questions about specific tactics and procedures. It quickly became obvious that Maria was telling the truth about her background. Her knowledge of special operations was too detailed and accurate to be fabricated. What made you leave the service? Sarah asked, though she suspected the answer would involve the dangerous nature of counter-cartel operations. Maria told Commander Mitchell the same story she had shared with Jake earlier. The failed operation, Carlos's capture and execution, the bounty placed on her head by the cartels, her decision to flee El Salvador to protect her young daughter. When Maria finished her story, the office became quiet. Sarah was looking at Maria with a mixture of respect and disbelief. This quiet cleaning woman had more combat experience than many of the SEALs under Sarah's command. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Sarah said slowly. "You are a highly trained special operations sniper with 8 years of combat experience. You have worked joint operations with American forces. You have extensive knowledge of cartel tactics and weapons. And for the past 3 years you have been cleaning our armory." "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied simply. Sarah shook her head with amazement. "Maria, this is not a security problem. This is a resource management problem. You are completely overqualified for your current position." Jake smiled slightly. This was exactly the reaction he had hoped for from his commanding officer. "That's what I thought you would say, Commander. The question is, what do we do about it?" Sarah stood up and walked around her desk to look directly at Maria. "The first thing we do is get you properly debriefed by our intelligence specialists. I want a complete record of your service history and operational experience." Maria felt a flutter of panic. "Commander Mitchell, please understand that I just want to keep my job and stay invisible. I don't want to draw attention to myself or put my daughter at risk." "Maria," Sarah said gently but firmly, "I appreciate your concerns about security. But you need to understand something important. You're not hiding in some small town anymore. You are on a United States naval facility surrounded by some of the most capable warriors in the world." Sarah walked over to her window and pointed toward the base perimeter. "We have multiple layers of security here. Armed guards, electronic surveillance, quick reaction forces. If anyone came looking for you here, they would have to get through all of that first." Jake nodded in agreement. "Maria, the cartels that were after you 15 years ago have been mostly destroyed by joint DEA and Salvadoran operations. The current criminal organizations are more focused on drug trafficking than settling old scores with retired operators." Maria wanted to believe them, but 15 years of fear and caution were hard to overcome. "What if you're wrong? What if someone finds out where I am and comes after Sophia?" "Then they'll have to deal with us," Sarah said simply. "Maria, you're not alone anymore. You're part of a community that takes care of its own." Sarah returned to her desk and picked up a folder. "I've been looking for qualified instructors for our urban warfare training program. We need people with real-world experience in counter-narcotics operations and urban combat situations." Maria felt her heart racing. "You want me to become an instructor?" "I want you to stop wasting your talents cleaning floors," Sarah replied. "You have knowledge and skills that could save lives. Our SEALs deploy to Central and South America regularly. They need to understand cartel tactics and urban warfare techniques." Jake could see that Maria was struggling with the idea of stepping back into a tactical role. "You don't have to make a decision right now," he said. "But Commander Mitchell is right. Your experience is too valuable to waste." Sarah sat back down and looked directly at Maria. "I'm going to make you an offer. Take the weekend to think about it. Talk to your daughter. Consider what kind of life you really want to have. On Monday morning, you can either come back here with your cleaning cart, or you can come back here as Senior Tactical Instructor Maria Santos. The choice is completely yours." Maria felt like her world was spinning. Everything she thought she knew about her future was changing faster than she could process. "What would happen to my daughter?" Maria asked quietly. "Sophia would be proud of her mother," Sarah replied with a smile. "Instead of hiding from who you are, you would finally be able to show her who you really are." Maria Santos drove home from the naval base in complete silence. Her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped the steering wheel of her old Honda Civic. The familiar 22-minute drive felt like it took hours as her mind raced with everything that had happened in the armory that morning. For 15 years, Maria had lived with one simple goal: stay invisible and keep Sophia safe. Every decision she made was based on avoiding attention and maintaining the quiet, predictable life they had built together. Now Commander Mitchell was asking her to do the exact opposite. When Maria arrived at her small apartment, Sophia was getting ready for school. Her 17-year-old daughter was tall and confident with the easy smile of someone who had never had to hide from anything. Sophia spoke perfect English and felt completely at home in America in a way that Maria envied. "You're home early, Mama?" Sophia said as she grabbed her backpack. "Did something happen at work?" Maria looked at her beautiful daughter and felt the weight of the decision she had to make. Sophia knew nothing about her mother's past life as a special operations sniper. She had no idea about the cartels or the bounty or the real reason they had come to America when she was just 2 years old. "Just some changes at work, mija," Maria said, trying to keep her voice normal. "Nothing for you to worry about. Have a good day at school." Sophia kissed her mother on the cheek and rushed out the door to catch the bus. She was a senior in high school with plans to study engineering at the local university. Everything Maria had worked for was designed to give Sophia this normal American teenage life. After Sophia left, Maria sat at her small kitchen table and tried to process what Commander Mitchell had offered her. The chance to use her real skills again, the opportunity to train elite warriors and maybe save lives with her knowledge. The possibility of finally being proud of who she was instead of ashamed of her past. But accepting the job would mean giving up the invisibility that had kept them safe for 15 years. It would mean trusting strangers with secrets that could still be dangerous. It would mean admitting to Sophia that her mother had been living a lie for her entire life. Maria made herself a cup of coffee and sat by the window looking out at the quiet neighborhood where they lived. She had chosen this apartment specifically because it was unremarkable, middle-class families with normal problems. No one asked questions about where people came from or what they did before moving here. The phone rang and Maria jumped nervously before recognizing Jake Morrison's number. She had given him her contact information in case Commander Mitchell needed to reach her over the weekend. "Maria, I hope you don't mind me calling," Jake said when she answered. "I wanted to check on you and see how you were processing everything that happened today." "I'm confused," Maria admitted. "For 15 years I've focused on staying hidden and keeping my daughter safe. Now you're asking me to step into the light and use skills that made me a target in the first place." Jake was quiet for a moment before responding. "Maria, can I ask you something personal? Are you happy cleaning floors and emptying trash cans? Is that really how you want to spend the rest of your working life?" The question hit Maria harder than she expected. She had been so focused on survival and safety that she had never really thought about happiness or fulfillment. "It doesn't matter if I'm happy," she said. "What matters is that Sophia is safe and has opportunities I never had. What if I told you that taking this instructor position would give Sophia even more opportunities?" Jake said. "Military families receive education benefits, healthcare benefits, housing allowances. Sophia could attend any university in the country with full financial support." Maria had not considered the practical benefits of working as a military instructor instead of cleaning staff. The pay would be significantly higher. The benefits would be much better. Sophia could pursue her engineering degree without worrying about student loans or financial stress. "But what about the danger?" Maria asked. "What if someone finds out about my past and comes looking for me?" Jake's voice became more serious. "Maria, I've done some research since this morning. The Drug Enforcement Administration has been very successful in Central America over the past decade. Most of the cartels that were active when you served have been destroyed or severely weakened." He continued explaining what he had learned. The current criminal organizations are focused on drug trafficking and money laundering. They don't have the resources or interest in tracking down retired operators from 15 years ago. Maria wanted to believe Jake, but fear was a hard habit to break. "What if you're wrong? What if I put Sophia at risk by taking this job?" "Then we'll protect both of you," Jake said simply. "Maria, you need to understand something about the military community. When you're one of us, we take care of you. Your safety becomes our responsibility." That afternoon, Maria walked to Sophia's high school to pick her up instead of letting her take the bus. She needed time to talk to her daughter about the decision she was facing, but she also needed to figure out how to explain 15 years of lies and secrets. They drove to a quiet park where they used to go when Sophia was younger. Maria parked the car and turned to face her daughter. "Sophia, I need to tell you something important about our family history." Sophia looked concerned. "Are you okay, Mama? You've been acting strange today. I haven't been completely honest with you about why we came to America." Maria began carefully. "I told you it was for better opportunities, but there was more to it than that." For the next hour, Maria told Sophia the truth about their past. About her military service in El Salvador. About the dangerous work she did fighting the cartels. about her partner Carlos and his death, about the bounty and the reason they had to flee. Sophia listened in stunned silence as her mother revealed a completely different version of their family story. When Maria finished talking, Sophia was quiet for several long minutes. "So you're not just a cleaning lady," Sophia said finally. "You're like a real soldier." "A sniper." "I was," Maria corrected. "That was a long time ago. I've been cleaning floors for the past 3 years because I wanted us to be safe and normal." Sophia looked at her mother with new understanding. "But now they want you to go back to being a soldier again." "Not exactly," Maria explained. "They want me to teach other soldiers what I learned from my experience, to help them be better prepared for dangerous missions." Sophia was quiet again as she processed this information. Maria waited nervously for her daughter's reaction. Everything depended on whether Sophia could accept this new version of who her mother really was. "Mama," Sophia said finally, "are you asking for my permission to take this job?" "I'm asking for your opinion," Maria replied. "This decision affects both of us. If I take this position, our whole life will change." Sophia smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "Maybe it's time for our life to change. Maybe it's time for you to stop hiding and start being proud of who you really are." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes. "Are you sure, mija? Are you ready for people to know that your mother was a warrior before she became a cleaning lady?" "Mama," Sophia said, reaching over to hug her mother, "I've always been proud of you, but now I understand why I should be proud." Monday morning arrived gray and cold, but Maria Santos felt different as she drove toward the naval base. Instead of her worn cleaning uniform, she wore professional clothes that Commander Mitchell had recommended. Dark pants, white shirt, black shoes that looked appropriate for someone who would be teaching elite warriors. Maria parked in the same spot she had used for 3 years, but everything else was different. She was no longer arriving early to avoid people. She was no longer carrying cleaning supplies and trying to be invisible. Today she was walking into her new life as senior tactical instructor, Maria Santos. Sophia had insisted on making her mother breakfast that morning. "You need to eat properly on your first day as a real instructor," her daughter had said with pride. The 17-year-old was still adjusting to learning the truth about her mother's past, but she was handling it better than Maria had expected. Jake Morrison was waiting for Maria at the main entrance to the training facility. He smiled when he saw her approaching with confidence instead of the nervous shuffle she had used as a cleaning lady. "Ready for your first day in your new career?" he asked. "As ready as I can be," Maria replied. She felt nervous, but it was a different kind of nervousness than she had experienced for the past 15 years. This was the excitement of facing a new challenge rather than the fear of being discovered. Commander Mitchell had arranged for Maria to shadow experienced instructors for her first week. She would observe classes and training exercises to understand how the Navy taught urban warfare and counterterrorism tactics. Then she would begin developing her own curriculum based on her real-world experience. The first class Maria observed was a basic urban warfare course for new SEAL trainees. The instructor was teaching room-clearing techniques and building searches. Maria watched quietly from the back of the classroom, taking notes and comparing the methods to what she had learned in El Salvador. After the class, the instructor approached Maria with curiosity. "Commander Mitchell told me you have extensive urban combat experience. What did you think of the lesson?" Maria hesitated for a moment. For 3 years she had trained herself to avoid giving opinions or drawing attention, but now she was being asked to contribute her expertise. "The techniques are solid," she said carefully. "But in Central America, we learned some modifications that might be useful when dealing with cartel compounds." The instructor was immediately interested. "What kind of modifications?" Maria explained how cartel buildings were often designed specifically to counter law enforcement tactics. They used reinforced doors, multiple escape routes, hidden weapon caches. The standard military approaches had to be adapted to account for these defensive measures. "Would you be willing to guest lecture in my next class?" the instructor asked. "My students could benefit from hearing about real-world applications of these techniques." Maria felt a flutter of the old confidence she had possessed as an operator. "I would be happy to share what I learned." Word spread quickly through the SEAL community that the former cleaning lady was actually a highly experienced special operations veteran. But instead of skepticism, Maria found acceptance and professional respect. These were people who understood that combat experience came in many forms and from many places. Jake introduced Maria to other instructors and training specialists throughout the week. Each conversation revealed how much her knowledge could contribute to their programs. She understood cartel tactics that most American forces had never encountered. She had experience with weapons and equipment that were common in Central America, but rare in other theaters. By the end of her first week, Maria was scheduled to teach her first official class. 20 Navy SEALs preparing for deployment to Colombia would learn about urban counter-narcotics operations from someone who had actually conducted them. Maria stood in front of the classroom, feeling more nervous than she had felt since her first combat mission in El Salvador. But when she began speaking about sniper tactics in urban environments, her confidence returned. These were skills she had mastered through years of dangerous operations. The SEALs listened intently as Maria described how to identify cartel lookout posts, how to predict escape routes based on building design, how to distinguish between civilians and combatants in crowded urban areas. This was knowledge that could not be learned from textbooks or simulations. After the class, several students approached Maria with additional questions. They wanted to know about specific weapon systems used by cartels, about communication methods and operational planning, about the psychological aspects of fighting an enemy that used terror as a primary weapon. Maria realized that she was not just teaching tactics and procedures. She was sharing hard-earned wisdom that could help these young warriors survive their own dangerous missions. For the first time in 15 years, she felt like her past experiences had real value and purpose. Jake found Maria after her first class looking tired but satisfied. "How did it feel to be back in your element?" he asked. "Different than I expected," Maria replied honestly. "I thought I would be afraid to talk about those old operations. Instead, I felt proud of what my unit accomplished and honored to share that knowledge with your SEALs." Commander Mitchell called Maria into her office at the end of the week for a performance review. "The feedback from your first week has been exceptional," she said. "The instructors are impressed with your knowledge and the students are requesting more classes with you." "I'm still learning how to be a teacher instead of an operator," Maria said. "But I think I'm starting to understand how my experience can help prepare others for the challenges they will face." Sarah smiled approvingly. "Maria, you've made the transition from cleaning lady to instructor look effortless. But I know it hasn't been easy to step out of hiding after so many years." Maria nodded. "The hardest part was telling Sophia the truth about who I used to be. But she surprised me. Instead of being afraid or ashamed, she was proud. She said it was time for me to stop hiding and start being the person I really am." "Smart daughter," Sarah commented. "How is she adjusting to having a mother who teaches special operations instead of cleaning floors?" "She's applying for the Naval Academy," Maria said with a smile. "She says if her mother can be a warrior, then maybe she can be one too." 6 months later, Maria stood in the same armory where her new life had begun. But now she was there as an instructor reviewing equipment with a team preparing for deployment. The weapons were the same ones she used to clean and dust. Now she was teaching SEALs how to maintain them and use them effectively. Jake found her in the armory during a break between classes. "Do you ever miss the old days when you were invisible?" he asked. Maria looked around the familiar room where she had spent 3 years hiding from her past. "No," she said firmly. "I spent too many years being afraid to be proud of who I am." Sophia was right. It was time to stop hiding. The armory still needed cleaning, of course. But now when Maria walked through those halls, she was not the invisible cleaning lady anymore. She was Senior Tactical Instructor Santos, a warrior among warriors, a woman who had found the courage to reclaim her identity and use her skills to serve others. The rifle that Jake had handed her that cold Tuesday morning sat in a place of honor in the training facility. It served as a reminder that extraordinary people can be found in the most ordinary places. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of recognition to change everything. Maria Santos had finally come full circle. From warrior to refugee to cleaning lady to instructor, she had learned that running from your past was not the same as escaping it. True freedom came from embracing who you are and using your gifts to help others. The invisible woman had found her voice again, and she was never going to be silent.